Hello, I'm Chunju. Today I'm going to walk you through this week's reading, which is Lucy Green's article and research on what can music educators learn from popular musicians. At the end of the presentation, I will raise several questions for us to ponder on in our discussion session. First of all, Green sets us up to understand the differences between formal music education and informal music learning practices. The formal music education consists of three parts. First, some written curricula, syllabi, explicit forms, or traditions of teaching and learning. Second, the instructors need some kind of recognition as master musicians or have professional qualifications to be allowed to teach. Third, students grow and are evaluated through systematic assessment mechanisms, such as graded exams. Notational skills in music literature are often an integral part of this kind of formal study. On the contrary, informal music learning would have none or little of these written curricula, does not require qualified teachers or assessment mechanisms, and a lot of time there's even no notation or music literature involved in the learning process. Nevertheless, such informal learning practices widely exist in musicians' acquisitions and passing on their musical skills and knowledge in many cultures. The musical participation is like a daily life event for everyone in many of those highly musical societies, even without any kind of formal music education. And in fact, the vast majority of traditional folk, jazz, and popular music actually originated or developed through the informal learning practices. Lucy Green points out that it's unfortunate how the formal music education seemed to only have lasting benefit for a minority of students. And they seem to have been aware of that, and that's why they've been trying to include popular music into the school music education in the recent decades. But why exactly is popular music important for us music educators? Is it just because the majority of the record sales in the music industry are in pop music, or that most kids and young people naturally favor or identify with pop music? If they already know it outside of school, why should we teach it anyway? Aren't we supposed to teach them what they don't know? Lucy Green argues that there are different aspects in popular music we should pay attention to in order to find out why many popular musicians, after they turn away from formal school education, were actually able to produce music that draw the interest and enjoyment of the majority of people. She also observes that the insert of the popular music into school is more an invasion of curriculum content. But the informal nature of the teaching strategies in this kind of music are almost completely overlooked, which is why we should get a closer look at the musicians and the informal learning practices, and perhaps apply them in our teaching activities so that we can hopefully encourage and benefit a larger number of students through musical participations. In this research, she interviewed 14 white guitar rock-based musicians in London, England area. 7 of them are at age 23 or older, who attended secondary school before the popular music was included in school music. 7 of them are from age 15 to 21. Some are still at school. These musicians are either professionals, semi-professionals, or the younger ones have their own bands, or they're planning to start one. She was mainly looking at how they acquire their musical skills and knowledge, how their learning activities coincide or differ from the formal music education we're familiar with. Also their attitudes as well as their values toward music and musicianship. Responses show that these musicians acquire their skills and knowledge largely through enculturation of music performing, creating, and listening, very similar to folk and traditional music making. But unlike the folk traditions where young participants follow masters' footsteps, watch them perform live, and receive apprenticeship training, the kids in the Western culture spend a lot of time learning on their own. Also, in group practices, they usually play with peers rather than masters or adults with greater skills. Like artists learn by copying paintings, the young musicians mainly learn by listening and copying recordings. This self-directed learning is of course only possible because of the development of the technologies. On listening, they could be either purposely listening with progress plans and strategies or just inattentively listening to a lot of music until it becomes natural to their ears, so they can recreate it. When the young musicians play with peers, there are also similar purposive learning activities led by group members, or they could be just playing, chatting, and learning with each other spontaneously in and outside of rehearsals. Interestingly, in this study, Green finds that they almost don't use notations in their music making and mostly do everything by ear. Some of them form a band before they have much control of their instruments that they play, but several people at a similar level would group up and learn to make music on the spot. In summary, all of these popular musicians' acquisition of musical skills and knowledge starts from oral copying, which consciously and unconsciously develop the years. Their styles of practice is not very systematic. Sometimes they practice a lot as they feel like it, and sometimes not at all for a very long time. They obtain techniques and some theory knowledge through trial and error, and the notation and theory-based knowledge are oftentimes only consciously pursued at the later stage of their musical life as they feel like they need more refinement. In this study, Green is also eager to find out these popular musicians' values toward music and musicianship. Unsurprisingly, all of them highly value the feel, the spirit, sensitivity of musicians over their technical ability. They also value friendship, cooperation, and qualities like tolerance, commitment, and responsibility. Another very important part of the musicianship to all the interviewees are enjoyment, love, and passion. She also observes that many of these musicians mention that playing music helps them build their self-esteem. When asked about other music, including classical, all of them show great enthusiasm and respect. I feel that these positive attitudes seem to contrast with the responses from many students who attended the traditional school music programs, where the rigid curriculum and assessment mechanisms often bring frustration, competition, and isolation. Many of these popular musicians have taken classical instrumental lessons at school and found them boring or unhelpful. In the older age group, before popular music was recognized in the school music program, although they probably found partners and started their band activities at school, they didn't receive any support from the school music and they felt alienated. The younger ones, on the contrary, were more appreciative of the school music program after the popular music was officially recognized, and they could actually make some connections. However, the informal learning practices are still the central process of how popular music is learned, and yet it is overlooked and sometimes downgraded even by popular musicians after they become teachers themselves. Lucy Green did mention some musicians took popular music tuition outside of school but also dropped out, perhaps due to the way it's taught. I think she's implying teachers' roles tend to impose unnecessary formality or structure in the teaching activities, which might not work in case of learning popular music. So at the end, she makes a few suggestions, including asking teachers to relax a bit and let students choose the music they like as their central learning materials. No joke. Allow and encourage oral enculturation and purposive listening and copying. Offer opportunities for peer-directed and group learning with less teacher involvement. Encourage the development of creative music making and nurture the love for music and the positive human qualities. So that sums up the article in this study. To this point, I feel that what Lucy Green is really getting at is, rather than teaching popular music education, we make music education happen through popular music. I do have a few questions that I wish to open the discussions with all of you. First, on how you see the demographics of the study may trigger some political issues, impact its relevance, or people's view on this topic. Second being, is it the informal learning approach that really matters, rather than it being popular, folk, or jazz, or other music? The remainder of my questions are on the technical side of this approach. How do we actually implement it within the formal education system with a curriculum and assessment requirement? And lastly, perhaps if we have time, we can brainstorm on the new possibilities after the virtual learning is so quickly and widely set up and adopted during the COVID time. Thanks for watching this presentation, and I hope we'll have fun in the discussion and hear what you think.